Welcome to 3 Minute Gestalt, and we have Unit 29 on the transpersonal. This is also a very big area, but I'll attempt to cover it in terms of some Gestalt kind of elements. So in Gestalt, we talk primarily about 3 zones of awareness, which are the inner zone, that is your inner experience in your body, your feelings, your sensations. We talk about the outer zone in terms of awareness of senses and the world around us, smells, sights, etc. And then we talk about what we call the middle zone, which is cognitive and imaginal and logical and rational, everything that has to do with mental processing. So most of the time, most of us are in one of these zones, including in sleep, which is entirely middle zone. So, however, it can be proposed that there are other zones of awareness, and there's a more subtle zone of perception, which Peter Nelson calls the biofield, which I think is an important topic, which I won't go into here, but it is a more subtle area of awareness, which is not so much about direct sensory input, certainly not about cognitive processing, but perhaps a deeper level of direct perception. But the transpersonal, which is what I want to talk about today briefly, is about, you could say, a zone of awareness which is not cognitive, and it's not somatic, and it's not sensory. And it's an awareness which, if it's not any of those, what is it? Well, it's something very subtle. It's something about a state of consciousness, perhaps without a particular object. And then we start getting into territory which sounds more like spirituality or meditation, or something that's kind of about something greater than us. But I don't want to, just delve into spirituality per se. I'm interested in the interface of psychotherapy and spirituality. And basically what we can say is that there's a number of issues here. One is that we can understand spirituality or the transpersonal through the lens of experience. We can understand it through the lens of philosophy or beliefs, and we can understand it through practices, much as we can also understand those 3 areas in terms of psychotherapy. So spirituality, the transpersonal, can constitute practices like prayer or meditation that are not goals in themselves, but a means, in a sense, to become more still and perhaps open to that deeper level of awareness. Of course, there's lots of belief systems and ideas around that you can read endless books about, or listen to talks which describe ways of thinking about the transpersonal or these exalted states. And then thirdly, and most importantly, is the experience. Now in Gestalt, we're very interested in experience. Everything we do is really oriented towards experience. We're not so much interested in theory or ideas. We want to take people into an experience through the Gestalt experiment, for instance. So similarly, in the realm of the transpersonal, the spiritual, the experience is at the core, because whatever that experience is of a broader, deeper, whatever you want to call it, level of awareness that doesn't have to do with mind or body or senses, that quality of experience can be profoundly transformative, and it's not something that can be engineered, but certainly practices can help take you towards it. So that kind of quality of experience is, most people have it at some point in their lives. And it can mean a lot, but it can also be quite overwhelming. So one of the things that psychotherapy can do, if the therapist is ready, grounded, prepared themselves, is to discuss those spiritual experiences, because usually there's not much space to do it. Either they're sucked into a particular religious framework, or they're dismissed or called psychotic or something. But a grounded Gestalt therapist who's in touch with their own beliefs and practices and experiences can make space for that in the psychotherapy, and that's got a lot of value. And we can support people also in their spiritual practices, and sometimes in chewing over spiritual beliefs which they might have swallowed. The last thing I'll say about this is that we can also apply Gestalt in terms of what I call religious wounding, which is basically trauma experienced in a religious type of context. And unfortunately, that does happen through all sorts of means, not just sexual abuse, but in terms of ramming beliefs down people's throats, etc., or publicly shaming people. So Gestalt and other therapies, but certainly Gestalt, can be applied to work to heal those religious wounds, which can then restore someone's ability to be engaged in the transpersonal without carrying the emotional pain. So we use Gestalt approaches to work with that, and it can be very effective, therefore, both on a sort of a a personal, emotional level, healing trauma, as well as in terms of reopening someone's spiritual transpersonal dimension, which they might have closed due to those traumatic experiences.